In a historical sense, it seems like the First World War is overlooked. Not many can retell the stories of the conflict or explain the reasons for having the war. The United States is unique in this because in Europe, World War I is a well-known and heavily discussed topic. Maybe we don't focus on it because the US barely partook in the war effort, but I believe we should learn more about the Great War. My philosophy is that understanding historical knowledge allows us to have a great understanding of our current world. It also can help us understand the aftermath of an event. Well, that's why World War I is important to us. It's the war that helps us understand why the Second World War was fought. It gives us insight into why Nazism grew in Germany and why so many people fell for the lies. It explains how people can be so desperate they do anything to achieve greatness, and it shows us that a series of events can lead to humanity's lowest points. This is the tale of how a forgotten war was the light that sparked humanity's biggest regret.
Vater, Mutter, Schwester, in eins ist unser Sinn. Beim Kanonenorchester, wir gehen.
The First World War was fought between two factions. The Central Powers consisted of Germany, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and the Ottoman Empire. The Entente consisted of Russia, sort of, the UK, France, and super late into the fray, the United States of America. So now that the battlegrounds are set, it's time for the fun part. Here's my attempt to super quickly summarize the First World War. Serbians kill the future Austro-Hungarian leader and wife. This makes them mad, so they declare war on Serbia. So Russia declares war on the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and then Germany declares war on Russia. This makes England and France mad, so they both declare war on the Central Powers, and they return the favor. Both sides then try to kick each other's ass, but things get rough and some trenches are built. So now trench warfare is used, and this becomes a war of attrition. Long story short, Russia becomes communist after Rich is killed, and then Germany gets tired after 4 long years of fighting, and an armistice is signed on November 11th, 1918. So it seems like a pretty straightforward conflict has its big issues that led to the Second World War. The main culprit here is the Treaty of Versailles. The treaty was written after the war, naturally, and while it tried to set some things up, like the League of Nations, it pretty much was a big fuck you to Germany. It's a treaty that punished Germany and made them feel ashamed and embarrassed to be German. Let's start off by just listing what it had done. First off, Germany had to cede a shit ton of land to neighboring nations. France, Belgium, Denmark, Poland, and Czechoslovakia all got land from Germany. Approximately 13% of German territory was given up. That's quite a bit if you ask me. Then the Rhineland, which is German territory that bordered France, Netherlands, and Belgium, was occupied and demilitarized, meaning German armies couldn't go into it. This was an attempt to increase border security for the French, but I don't know how well that really worked out. Anyways, colonies that once belonged to Germany, like Togoland and parts of West Africa, were now taken over by the League of Nations. Then the German army was shrunk down to only 100,000 men and no draft could be held. But the kicker to all of this? The Germans were forced to pay 269 billion gold marks, or $37 billion for the war. See, this treaty now solidifies the idea that Germany is the sole nation to blame for starting the Great War. But how? Think about it. If Serbian nationalists had killed the Archduke and Austria-Hungary declared war first, then how could you blame the Germans? This is why the Treaty of Versailles had a negative impact on Germany that eventually would plunge Europe into another world war.
Unser deutsches Volk siegt ein! Sieg!
After all of this, Germany was forced to institute a new government. Gone were the days of the Kaiser, and instead Germany had a new democratic system. The birth of the Weimar Republic is another root cause of the Second World War. The main problem of the Weimar Republic is that not one party had an overall majority, so parties would make alliances with each other to gain that majority. The problem with this is that those parties had different goals and different ways on how to run the newly established republic. This made the government ineffective to do its job, as nothing would really get done. Another big issue faced for the Weimar Republic were the reparations they still had to pay. Seems like paying $37 billion would put you in a very difficult economic situation. So how do they try and solve this problem? Simple. Germany just asked for the payments to be suspended while they were fixing their broken economy. Naturally, France and Belgium sent forces to invade the Ruhr, a German area which had some resources like factories. Now, according to the Weiner Holocaust Library, by 1923, a loaf of bread would cost 200 trillion marks. So, yeah, Germany's very fucked right now, and the Allies weren't too keen on helping them out. Germany would have to rely on foreign loans with the Dawes Plan, which did help Germany for a while until the Wall Street crash of 1929. With high unemployment, a broken economy, and a government with no real power, Germans were desperate for an answer. Desperate for a so-called hero to help them. Germany was in a living hell and needed someone to rescue them. Insert Hitler and the Nazi Party. Hitler was a former World War I veteran and a German nationalist, despite being an Austrian, and quickly rose to the ranks in the Nazi Party due to his great ability to speak. The most radical idea the Nazis had was that of having a pure Aryan nation ridding of those deemed unfit, such as Jews, Gypsies, and the disabled. However, Hitler and the Nazis had a goal of undoing the wrongs of the Treaty of Versailles and wanted to reunite Germanic speakers. A desperate nation had finally found someone who was hell-bent on ridding the treaty and making Germany a superior nation. Through his great ability to speak and his charisma, the Germans fell for Hitler's lies. Except in a way, Hitler didn't lie. After 1933, when Hitler became Chancellor, he did undo what the Treaty of Versailles did for the Germans. By March of 1935, Hitler had announced that he would rebuild the German military and even institute conscription again. In January of 1936, he remilitarized the Rhineland and annexed Austria in 1938. Hitler would later annex Czechoslovakia in 1939, and in September of that same year, he invaded Poland. By this point, Germany was a very powerful nation, and only 20 years after World War I. This part doesn't really need an explanation, but I'll tell you the aftermath of this catastrophe. Basically, the invasion of Poland was the start of World War II in Europe, and it would be the deadliest conflict in history. Estimates of over 50 million casualties were the result of this horrific war, and it all stems from World War I. A war dubbed to end all wars was just a segue to an even deadlier conflict that would forever change the world. So why should we care about World War I? Because it gives us insight to how Germans allowed Nazis to take control of the nation. It shows us why World War II was fought. It makes us realize that World War II wasn't their war, but their grandfather's war.